Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready to dive into some serious number crunching. We're tackling the September 2024 Consumer Price Index today.
The CPI, the one and only, right?
You got it. The big cheese of inflation reports.
And it's funny, so many people hear CPI and their eyes just
Glaze over, but tell me about it.
This data, it's like the secret sauce behind so many financial decisions people make, both for like everyday folks and the entire US economy.
No doubt.
Whether you're glued to CNBC or just trying to figure out why your grocery bill looks like a phone number these days, this report matters.
It's true.
So we're breaking it all down today, straight from the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
The BLS, gotta love those acronyms.
Right.
We'll try to keep it to a minimum. But yeah, the BLS, we're looking at their raw numbers, the analysis they put out, the whole 9 yards.
And those little footnotes.
Oh yeah, those footnotes. Sometimes that's where the real story is hiding, right?
Absolutely. They can be like little clues,
Yeah.
revealing a much bigger picture than those flashy headlines.
Totally. Okay, so big picture first. CPI ticked up by 0.2% this September. Okay. Now that is seasonally adjusted, which is important to remember because...
Right, because otherwise you get those weird swings.
Exactly. This gives us a better sense of the real underlying trend. And speaking of trends, that seemingly small increase brings the year-over-year inflation rate to 2.4%, which, if you're keeping
track, is the lowest we've seen since February of 2021.
Wow, 2021. Feels like a lifetime ago.
It does. Remember all those debates about transitory inflation?
Oh, I remember it well. Everyone throwing that word around.
Right. This data might actually give us some clues about what's here to stay and what's finally starting to cool down.
The million-dollar question for sure. So what's behind this little price slowdown? Well, two biggies. Food and energy. But here's the kicker. They're pulling in opposite directions.
Interesting.
Food prices kept climbing up 0.4% just this past month. And shelter, cost rent, mortgages, you name it, up by 0.2%.
So basically the two things that eat up the biggest chunk of people's budgets.
Exactly. Those two categories alone, they make up a whopping 75% of the total CPI increase for September.
It's really eye-opening when you think about it, how much those essential costs affect everyone, no matter how much money you make.
Totally. You got to eat. You got to have a roof over your head.
Exactly. Those are non-negotiables for most people.
Absolutely. But hey, let's not forget that good news, you mentioned energy prices. Right. They actually went down. Continuing the trend we saw in August, we're looking at a 1.9% drop for
September.
Which, it's worth noting, follows a 0.8% decrease the month before.
Back-to-back drops.
So is this a blip? Maybe because summer travel is over? Or something bigger going on with like global energy markets?
It's a really good question, especially with all the news about mention a specific geopolitical event related to energy.
That's what I'm saying. It's like those fuel prices are trying to tell us something about the bigger picture.
Exactly.
Okay, but before we go too far down that rabbit hole, let's get back to something we all know and love, or at least love to complain about: food prices.
Everyone's favorite topic, right?
Right. And this report, it gets granular. It breaks down 6 major grocery categories.
Big.
Yeah, 6 of them. And you know what? 5 of them saw price increases this month.
5 out of 6. Ouch.
That's what I'm saying. And this is why we got to go deeper than just the headlines,
Absolutely. When you see that 5 out of 6 grocery categories got more expensive, it really hits home. This is about real people's lives, not just numbers on a spreadsheet.
Preach.
And speaking of things you find in your grocery cart, can we talk about eggs for a second?
Eggs.
What do the little guys do now? They're up like crazy amount. 8.4% just in September. Omelet inflation is real, people.
Whoa, 8.4%. Now hold on a minute before everyone runs out and buys up all the eggs.
I know, don't hoard.
Because sometimes we see these spikes with eggs, often it's tied to seasonal stuff. Now, if this trend keeps going for a few months, then we might have a real problem on our hands.
Good point. Okay, so maybe don't build that egg fort just yet. Speaking of things that might be tied to the calendar, let's talk fuel oil. Not something everyone buys at the supermarket, I know.
Unless you're one of those people who cooks over their furnace, right?
Hey, don't judge. So fuel oil prices, they took a nosedive this month, down 6%.
Okay, that's pretty significant.
Yeah, but get this. Over the past year, fuel oil has dropped by a whopping 22.9%. That's almost a quarter of your tank for free.
And that, my friend, brings us right back to those global energy trends we were chatting about. A drop that big, it's gotta be connected to mention a specific event or trend, right? Makes you wonder, could this ripple out, affect other parts of the economy, Something to keep an eye on, for sure.
Absolutely. Okay, that's a lot to process. Let's shift gears for a second, talk about another category that's been hitting everyone's wallets hard.
Shelter.
Rent and mortgage is always a fun topic.
Right.
We saw a 0.2% increase this month. Might not sound like much, but those fractions add up.
Believe me.
They do, especially when you consider that owner's equivalent rent thing.
Oh yeah, that always sounds so technical.
It does, right? But basically, it's just the BLS's way of estimating how much it would cost for homeowners to rent their own homes. They use it to track housing costs for both renters and owners.
So it keeps everyone on the same playing field.
Exactly. And guess what? Both of those numbers went up in September.
So no escaping those rising housing costs, it seems. Doesn't matter if you're signing a lease or paying a mortgage.
Seems that way.
But you know what did go down?
What's that?
Lodging away from home. Hotels, motels, those fancy tree houses you can rent on Airbnb, down by 1.9% in September.
Get out of town.
I know, right? Maybe it's time for a vacation.
Hold your horses there, travel bug. Remember what we said about those seasonal changes? This could be a temporary thing. Maybe everyone's done with their summer trips, or it could be specific types of lodging, like maybe budget-friendly options are getting cheaper, or even certain locations. The report doesn't really give us that level of detail.
Okay, so maybe hold off on booking that round-the-world trip for now. Always going to stay skeptical, right? That's what makes us informed consumers of all this data. Now, we've covered the big movers and shakers, but this CPI report, it's like a feast.
The full-on data buffet.
Exactly. And I think I spotted a couple of tasty morsels. Oh, like what? For instance, did you know that college textbooks are up 2.9% compared to this time last year?
Ouch.
Yeah, students and parents are definitely feeling that one.
No doubt about it. And, that actually ties into a much bigger issue, the rising cost of education overall. It's something policymakers are wrestling with. And honestly, depending on what you do for a living, it could have implications for your field, too. Think about it. How do these rising costs affect the future workforce? Something to consider.
It really makes you think, Okay, switching gears again for all the techies out there. Remember how we talked about those top-line numbers not always telling the whole story?
Oh, yeah.
Well, smartphones, they seem to be bucking the trend with a 9.3% price drop compared to last year.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
9.3%. That's huge.
All right, sounds like a steal.
It does, but...
Yeah.
And this is a big but. The smartphone market is, it's kind of its own beast.
How so?
Because you've got new models coming out all the time, constantly changing contracts, deals, trade-ins. It's a lot to keep track of.
So that 9.3% might not be the whole picture.
Exactly. It might not reflect what people are actually paying. It's more about how they're moving the pricing around within the industry itself.
So it's like those sales signs that are up year-round doesn't necessarily mean it's a good deal.
Exactly. Don't go ditching your old phone just yet.
Okay, good to know. So should people even pay attention to these smartphone numbers?
I mean, it's good to be aware of them, but don't make any rash decisions based on one data point. You got to compare apples to apples,
Yeah.
Compare the exact phone model you have now with the newest version, factor in any contract changes, trade-in values, then you'll see if it's actually a good deal or just some fancy marketing.
Always got to read the fine print, right? Okay, we've covered a lot today. The big picture, some really specific examples, but how does this all connect back to, our listeners? What does this data actually mean for their wallets?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And we've thrown a lot of numbers your way today. The key is, how does this connect to your own finances?
Right, like what should people be paying attention to?
Exactly. Like, are you seeing those higher grocery prices we talked about in your own shopping? Has your rent gone up? What about those energy bills? Any changes there? It can be good or bad, but noticing those changes is key.
So it's about connecting those dots, those big trends, to what you're actually experiencing in your own life.
Precisely. Maybe you're someone who eats a ton of eggs. That 8.4% jump, you might want to rethink those omelets.
4, stock up while you still can.
Or, hey, maybe you're a homeowner about to renew your mortgage. Those rising shelter costs. Yeah, that's going to affect your monthly payments.
It all adds up for sure. So this report, it's not just about understanding the economy in some abstract way, right?
Right. It's about giving you the tools to make smarter decisions about your own money, your spending, your saving.
Knowledge is power, as they say. But here's the thought. We've been talking about the CPI like it's this big national average, right? But inflation, it's not the same everywhere, is it?
That's a really important point. What you experience in your city, your town, it could be totally different from what's happening on a national level.
So like what's breaking the bank here in New York might be a walk in the park for someone in, say, Iowa.
Exactly. Housing costs, transportation, even the price of a gallon of milk, it can vary so much from place to place. What you're experiencing in your local economy matters.
So how do people find that local data?
The BLS, they actually publish data for specific areas, too. It's like getting a personalized inflation report.
So it's like, yeah, zooming in on that big national map and seeing what's happening street by street.
Exactly, connecting those dots between the big picture and your own backyard.
Love it. Okay, so for our listeners who are ready to go full on data detective, where can they find this city-specific CPI info?
Easy teasy. Head over to the Bureau of Labor Statistics website. They've got a whole section dedicated to local area data.
Awesome.
You can search by state, by metro area. It's all there.
So cool. We'll definitely link that up in our show notes so you can find it easily.
Definitely.
Well, this has been quite the deep dive, wouldn't you say?
Oh, for sure.
Crunch the numbers, unpack those trends, hopefully given everyone a lot to think about.
And remember, data, it's only as powerful as your ability to actually use it, right?
Truth.
So take these insights, apply them to your own financial life. Keep those brains engaged. The more you know, the better equipped you are to handle whatever the economy throws your way.
Couldn't have said it better myself. A huge thank you to you, our amazing listeners, for joining us on this journey into the heart of inflation. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep on crunching those numbers.